Hello everyone, this is lecture number 16 in a series which is called Thought as Word Dynamics, which is the background of the work I've been performing in artificial intelligence over the years, starting way back in 1987 when I was asked to join the Connex project of British Telecom, and where I developed a piece of software of artificial intelligence called ANELA, which stands for Associative Network with Emergent Logical and Learning Abilities, which is self-explanatory. What I'm going to do today is to go deeper, to dig into that notion I've developed that what is likely to be stored in memory is word pairs, a pair composed of two words, like cat and mat, like in cat, the cat is on the mat. Things are that way. Where does that idea start? And I said a lot about it in the previous lecture, number 15. I showed how I tried to use the best of Chinese philosophy or Chinese linguistics from archaic period, from like the 4th century BC, and the philosophy or linguistics which was developed at the same time in Greece. Why is it useful to put the two together? Because the languages are very different, and the type of problems that the language may produce are of a different nature. And so there are things that the Greek didn't see about the usage of the language, and there are things that the Chinese didn't see. And particularly in the lesson, lecture number 15, I put together Aristotle's categories, what he called the categories, which are 10 types of word pairs. Aristotle, that's where I got the idea. Aristotle regards as being the basic unit, the brick. The brick is the association of two words, essentially in his view, because a word isolated doesn't mean anything. But as soon as you're putting two names together, two words together, two nouns together, you're actually getting something, like the cat is on the mat. If you just say cat, or if you say mat, you've got some abstract, not a category, but an abstract concept. A cat, yes, but where, how, in what particular way, and so on. What I used essentially, what I dug in last time was taking together these notions from the Chinese of things being penetrable or impenetrable, like a rose. The object, the rose, is impenetrable. You can put two roses exactly in the same place, but redness, roses are red, the redness you can put in the different places. You can coat things with redness, and at the same time you can coat the same things with being thorny, like a rose, to have petals and so on. And if you put that as on a network, you got two things that get together. What you can summarize, and that's the way that Aristotle already had done it. Between two names, between two nouns, you can say A is a bee, like a bee is an insect, and something like also to have, has. Cheops has a pyramid. These are the two building blocks in our languages, and it's been defended, particularly in the Middle Ages, by linguists, that you can actually sum up everything that you say by translating it as a combination, a sequence of A is B, B has C, C is a D, and so on. If you wish, you can do that. It's possible with languages like Indo-European languages. In Chinese, or at least in archaic Chinese, the language was constituted in a way that you could only have a relationships of the type A has B. It was not possible to say A is a B. You could do it. You could do it through various ways. You could let it understand, for instance, by creating a higher up category, saying traction animals, and you would call that ox horse, because that's something they have in common, an ox and a horse. If we can put them in front of a cart. Or in Chinese, you could say water mountain, and that meant nature. You can do things of that type. Or you could do all other things with pauses. With pauses in the language, you could actually say something, excuse me, pause, and make it understand that what comes after the pause is a larger context, a wider context of the way you say things. But when you look at the language, you don't see that. When you look at the written language, you don't see the pauses and things of that type. So the language was not so much, the Chinese language was not so much to deal with inclusion, with the idea that a bee is an insect. But that was already at the time of the ancient Greek, and that was already written into the Greek language, and it has stayed with us, and we can still do that very easily. What I'll try to do today, I will make clear by giving the title of the chapter, which is chapter 12 in my manuscript. And it says, in a somewhat complex way, the hereditary principle is historical. It allows syllogistic reasoning and amounts to the emergence of reason, between inverted commas, in history. I could say it in a different way, which is more explicit. How do we link word pairs? When we have a set of word pairs, how do we link them together in order to produce further thinking? The final way I could summarize what I'm going to say today is, and I already introduced it, the notion the ancient Greek could use the syllogism, the ancient Chinese could not. Here's the text, and I'll be very... I'll give a lot of examples to make it clear what I'm trying to say. The main distinctive feature between hereditary and endogenous fields is the fact that the former are anti-symmetrical and transitive, while the latter are symmetrical and intransitive. Transitive means that if B is an A and C is a B, then things that I would say about A will be true for C too. It's transitive. It means that it is transmittable from one to the other, or it applies to. I'll give an example. Dogs are mammals. I could say that mammals are animals. And I could say as well, by connecting the two extremes, I could say, therefore, dogs are animals, because mammals are animals and dogs are mammals. It is intransitive. You can't reverse it. You can't reverse it in simply by turning the terms. You can't say mammals are dogs. If you want to say something like that, you have to say some mammals are dogs, because some other mammals are different. But it is true to say that all dogs are mammals and that all mammals are animals, but you can't go the opposite direction. That's the idea. There's the implicit idea of an arrow. And that's what was missing from archaic Chinese, that possibility of having that arrow going in one particular direction. An example of a has-a relationship is the pharaoh has a pyramid, but that's reversible. You can reverse it. It is symmetrical, and there's no idea of transmission. The pharaoh has a pyramid, and the pyramid has a pharaoh. And the difficulty there is that once you've said that, you can't say anything more. You can't add to that. That's closed. There's a loop, and you've closed the loop by saying the pharaoh has a pyramid and the pyramid has a pharaoh. While when you're saying that dogs are mammals, you can keep on doing, as I said, that mammals are animals, animals are creatures, and so on. To go back to an example I gave in the previous lecture, where, and I spoke about that earlier on already, something which is very perplexing for anthropologists, the Newer of Sudan saying that twins are birds, and when you go a bit deeper in the text, you see that they say it in the same way that birds are twins. That doesn't work in our type of language, Indo-European, where you have transitive relationship. A twin is a human being is a mammal, a mammal is an animal. There are other animals, the birds, but birds are not the same as mammals. You are one or the other, and so it's impossible in French or in English to say that twins are birds or birds are twins. And I explained what the Newer mean by that, and how they explained it, in particular to the anthropologist Evans Pritchard, what they meant when they said they were saying that. And because he was a bit reluctant to admit that twins were birds and birds were twins, they added, to knowing that he would understand that they are so in the eyes of God. In the eyes of God, twins are birds and birds are twins. But there we go beyond the natural, we go into the supernatural. It's another type of approach of the same thing. Once it has been said that twins have birdness and that birds have twinness, one has gone full circle, and there's very little that can be added. On the contrary, the intellectual power associated to the hereditary fields, once it has been noticed, is staggering. You can keep chaining on the concept. The dog is a canine, which is a vertebrate, which is an animal, which is a creature, and so on. The syllogism certainly meets its demise in examples like one I quoted earlier in a previous lectures, where when you say violets are blue, and you say blue is the color, you're not allowed to say anything more. And in particular, it is forced to conclude that therefore violets are a color. It would seem from the other types of syllogism that you would be able to do that. But the fact is that that's the one type of combination that cannot be produced. And I'll come back to that. In so many other cases, the speaker will experience the elation that there is no end to the richness of including exemplars into labels and allowing the essential properties belonging to these to show her down. Indeed, if you have properties which are common to all animals, they will be true in particular of mammals, but also of fish, of reptiles. And if they are true of all mammals, they will be true of canines, of felines, of rodents, and so on. These at every level, what is regarded as the essential properties, and again, that's a phrase from Aristotle, that can show her down to the exemplars which are below. Violets are flowers, flowers have petals, flowers have fragrance, and so on. Therefore, violets have petals, violets have fragrance, and so on, trickling down, showering down, if you wish. The contrasting principles of deepening abstraction on the way up. When you go from a particular dog to canines, and then female to canines, and then to mammals, and then you go to animals, and so on, your category encompasses a larger number of instances. You have more and more things that you're speaking of, but what is common to them gets restricted little by little, although the properties which is attached to the top one still trickle down. You've got a motion in two directions, on the way up and on the way down, with different types of properties being attached. The contrasting principles of deepening abstraction on the way up, defining the essence, and of extension to a decreasing number of exemplars on the way down, reveals a whole world of apparently fresh information through the constraints that the dialectics of quantifiers imposes. The quantifiers is when you say all dogs are mammals. That's one type of quantify all. But when you want to reverse it, when you want to talk about from mammals to dogs, you can only say some mammals are dogs, and that's a quantifier for a restricted number of the instances. The sentence, minimally composed of a word pair and an operator linking the two, is either symmetric or anti-symmetric. And as I said, you can summarize these operator linking the two in English, in French, in Spanish, in Italian, by a relationship, saying it's a relationship of the type is a or has a. Dogs are mammals. The pharaoh has a pyramid. The Greeks called such clauses from a word pair logos. But when the word logos was used in a more technical sense, logos referred specifically to the anti-symmetric type because of its disposition to call for more. Once you've said that dogs are mammals, you feel like saying something about mammals, and from the mammals you want to say something maybe about the animals, or at least you're allowed to do that. Theoretically, once you've said that twins are birds and that therefore birds are twins, there's nothing more that you can add. You've got something which flows onto itself, like when you say proverb, like father, like son. What do you want to add to that? No, that's something you wanted to say. You said it, and essentially the person who's listening to you can not add anything more to that, or apart from quoting possibly another proverb or things of that time. The bringing together of two logon being the plural for logos, for an evocative purpose is the analogia. And the word analogia in ancient Greek means simply proportion. So, a syllogism is a proportion, and I'm going to explain why. When numbers or algebraic symbols constitute the analogia, the equivalent of the anti-symmetric clause, the inclusion, is a ratio. 4:12, what 1:3, and you can call that a third. 4 is a third of 12, in the same way as 1 to 3 is a third. And this is why logos translates as ratio in mathematics. A mathematical analogia is what we still refer to today as a proportion. If there is a common middle term to a proportion, i.e. if there are 3 terms on the proportion instead of 4, it is said to be continuous versus discrete when there are 4 terms. It's as if I say now, when I said 4:12, what 1:3, I mentioned 4 numbers. I mentioned 4, I mentioned 12, I mentioned 1, and I mentioned 3. But if I say 4:12, what 12:36, I've only got 3 terms now. And there's a middle term, which is 12. 4 is to 12, or 12 is to 36, i.e. again a third. 12 is called in mathematics, in an instance like this, it's called the geometric mean. It's 12 is the geometric mean between 4 and 36. Why? Because when you multiply 4 by 36, you get 144. But if you want to find a number, the square of which is 144, you've got 12. In a continuous proportion, the common middle term is called a mean. I just said it. In mathematics, you call that the geometric mean in the example I've given. In Greek, meson. In the discursive mode, 4 figures of the analogia are possible, whether the ratios brought together face to face are both antisymmetric, both symmetric, or one symmetric and the other antisymmetric. If the analogia is discrete, has 4 terms, it corresponds to what we call now an analogy, and the Greek called the paradigm. If you got 3 terms, you got syllogism. See, if you have 4 terms, you have an analogy. The eyes, ears, and the Greek didn't call that analogy, because analogy, the word analogy, analogia, is the word for proportion. If you say the eyes are to the face like the windows to a house, you got 4 terms. You got the eyes, you got the face, you got the windows, and you got the house. There you got an analogy. That's the way we call it nowadays. It has limited uses, the analogy, as a limited uses such as drawing attention on homomorphisms between different domains, showing that you have the same type of configuration, that you have the same kind of shape there somewhere. And it has therefore heuristic strength. An analogy is very powerful in making it possible to think. You can, with the analogy, you find the same configurations and different types of things. There's a current debate. Do the large language models, can they produce analogy? Because people are aware that nowhere in nature is analogy being used apart from in human reasoning. So if you see analogies being produced in something like a large language model, then one of your defenses against calling that machine an intelligent creature, you lose it, because making analogies we regard is really at the core of what is intelligent on us, in our behavior. Now the fact is that I do believe I've already seen in responses given to me, in particular by GPT-4, I've seen analogy being produced. We should look for more examples, because I think that's a real test for true intelligence. The analogy has limited uses such as drawing attention on homomorphisms and the same configurations between different domains, and has therefore heuristic strength. Also, parallel terms, the major and the second middle, first middle and minor, can stand for each other for evocative, figurative use under the name of metaphor. Once I've said that the eyes are to the face like the windows to a house, I can, for instance, call the eyes the windows of the face, of things of that type, or the windows the eyes of the house. In the analogia, if the analogia is continuous, it allows a direct relationship being established between the major and the minor through the middle term or mean under the form of an informative conclusion. And we are dealing here with the syllogism. If I say whales are mammals, mammals feed their young, therefore whales feed their young. Whales is the major, whales are mammals. The young are the minor, mammals feed their young, and the middle term is the mammals, which is being used between the two. Mammals is the middle term, also called the mean. You could also say that's the meaning, actually, if you wish, because it's only the mammals, the notion of the mammals, that makes it possible to draw the conclusion that the whales feed their young with milk. Aristotle covers only under the label syllogism 3 of the possible figures when the associative chains are both antisymmetric. Dogs are canines, canines are mammals, therefore dogs are mammals. When the first is antisymmetric and the second symmetric, violets are flowers, flowers have petals, therefore violets have petals. And when the first is symmetric and the second is antisymmetric, the pharaoh has a pyramid has a monument, therefore the pharaoh has a monument. In such cases, the inference is in the mode of the literal conclusion, i.e. demonstrative and informative, in the sense of bringing one signifier beyond the reach of its immediate constellation, which is a set of possible associative chains within a language's lexicon. And that's something I insisted in a prior lecture on the fact that what is the syllogism doing? If you look at these word pairs as memory traces, and if you connect one pair with another one with one term being common, you make it possible for the two further down, the one which is in this case the whales and the young, you connect them to feeding through the mammals. So what you make with the syllogisms, you extend the range of application of one-word terms to another one through the one which is the middle term, the one which is common to the two word pairs. The antisymmetric nature of the logos, properly so called, encourages the concatenation of others. Any clause acts as a pointer to further chaining. This potentially soon raises the question of the compatibility of subsequent clauses, as it can be observed that sense may diverge, so that speeches starting from the same premises turn out to be incompatible, i.e. claim states of affairs which are contradictory. And the fact that you can start from the same starting position and develop arguments which become contradictory, like typically lawyers would do to defend their case. They agree in the beginning, yes, it's true that there's a house here and this has happened and so on, and then they little by little they deduce different thing from what's going on there, and at the end they show opposite positions. And here lies the crux of the quarrel between Socrates and the sophists. Here lies surprisingly the roots of what became known under the name of philosophy. It is in this distinction between being contradictory and being self-contradictory and being true. You can say that something is not self-contradictory, which is then wonderful and beautiful, but it's not the same as me and saying that it is true. These are two different notions. The ancient Chinese had ignored the antisymmetric clause, which is the reason why the richness of the intertwining of the hereditary and endogenous fields was close to them. This is the end of my lecture today. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope I see you for number 17 sometime in the future. Thank you so much.